All right, well, earlier this week, I sat down with former PGA Tour pro Justin Leonard to talk about everything going on in the golf world. And we talked, among other things, about what the Ryder Cup may look like later this fall.
Well, the fans certainly make for a unique experience at the Ryder Cup, and they're a big part of the event, the atmosphere that it creates. They're a big part of the energy level that you see the players display. But, I would rather see a Ryder Cup without fans than no Ryder Cup at all. My guess is that they're going to have limited fans. They've talked about doing that at Memorial at the second half of July, having somewhere, 5 to 10,000 people versus they're normally probably 30,000 people. A Ryder Cup typical day is 20 to 25,000 people. If you could properly, educate 5 to 10,000 people at a Ryder Cup, there's only 4 groups at a time on the golf course on Friday and Saturday. So I think it would still create that atmosphere for the players. It would give the fans a chance to experience what it's like to be at a Ryder Cup. It would bring that energy back to both the players and the viewers at home. So I'm very hopeful that they can have fans there in a limited capacity.
Thinking back to events like the match, again, like what happened at Seminole, is that something that you think the sport should be doing more of? Is that a venue for fans and maybe more casual fans to connect with pro golfers in a different way? And I think is a real way, perhaps, to really grow interest durably over time.
Well, I think having one-off events like that, especially when you're able to include a couple of golfers like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, who maybe relate more to, the amateur golfer that watches at home, and they're still able to watch Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods. I think things like that are important. Each and every week, maybe not during this time, but, there are multiple pro-ams around golf tournaments, and they have a huge effect on the local charities and the communities that they're playing in. But to be able to have such a deep reach with an event like the match or the match 2, as it was played just a month or so ago, I think that's massive, not only for the game of golf, but for building unity within, our country right now, which is so important.
Do you feel like the sport has done enough from a price point perspective? And I guess whose responsibility is that? Is that the USGA trying to get, their members to charge less? Is it the OEMs who need to not make the latest and greatest every year? Like, does price need to be more of a conversation in getting more people playing more golf?
Well, I think it's a barrier for a lot of people, but I also know there's, if you've got to have the latest and greatest, yeah, you may have to spend that $400 or $500. But I also know, for a lot of players that are willing to get last season's model or 2 years ago, there are great sales available. And I know places like Dick's Sporting Goods and Golf Galaxy, they offer the latest and greatest for the ones that have to have that. But they also have other price points so that getting into the game from, just buying a simple a driver or a wedge to really getting started in the game and needing a full outfit from irons and woods and balls and everything, they make it reasonable for those that need to do it on more of a budget.
And of course, Shauna Smith, as you know, in your household, difficult to maybe stock the closet with all the latest and greatest on a budget, but certainly something I think most golfers are quite conscientious of.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of ridiculous when you step back and think about how much it costs not only to buy the equipment for golf, but also just to play around a golf in a lot of places. I think that is one of the big question marks out there. And I'm happy you asked him about that, because that is something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be a more affordable sport, because right now it's pricing many Americans out of it. But I think it's interesting what he said about the Ryder Cup and just the interest there and playing there without fans and the feeling about that, because I think that's going to be the big question, not only for golf, but really all sports going forward, just exactly how that's going to affect some of the motivation of the athletes potentially out there.
And guys, I'm glad to hear him talk about the sport needing to accommodate newer fans. It's interesting. Earlier on Yahoo Finance Live, we had Patrick Mouratoglou, who is Serena Williams' tennis coach. And we've got the U.S. Open now, just recently announced that it's going to happen, but with no fans. And we discussed the same kind of thing. Now, he was on because he has created his own little competitor tournament that has a little bit of a lighter concept. But he said the same thing about the sport of tennis without prompting, which is, he said, it doesn't renew its fan base. And I think there are a lot of these kind of old school individual type sports that in many ways have become a little dusty. And, Myles and I spent 2 years on our sports business podcast talking about how when Tiger's playing, Tiger Woods is the story and golf is interesting. And when he's not, we can try to talk about other young players on tour and act like it's the same, but it isn't. And, we would like to see the sport of golf try to get younger, get a little more flexible, get a little sexier, and we'll see if that happens. But doing it with no fans is a tough way to start. That's not what's going to pull it off. I will say, though, so far, I think the return to golf has been quite successful, and they've done things well, all things considered. Same with NASCAR. I think NASCAR has done things well with the no fans so far.
Well, and also, Dave, just going off that, the TV ratings, too, the fact that I think it's 2 points here. One, there's no fans, so you have all those diehards that maybe would be going to the tournament, tuning in. That's not really that big of a boost. But really, the other thing is just this pent-up demand. What was it? The Charles Schwab Open the other weekend that had record numbers just in terms of how many people watched. I think it was the most watched final round of that Charles Schwab Challenge in 15 or 16 years. So it speaks to the fact that while there's still so many uncertainties out there, it could be good news for a lot of these TV networks, at least in the short term.
And how would we have been talking about that tournament, right?
Right. I think it's an interesting point on renewing the fan base. And I think also 3 examples, NASCAR, golf, and tennis, sports that maybe need to accept who their fans are and actually lean into what those fans want, rather than worrying about growing the tent. I mean, golf is never going to compete with football, but it's probably, the wrong thing to think that you need to, or that you should, or that anything that football does would be applicable to what your fans want to see. So maybe a learning experience for all.